بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نويت التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير ونفع الإفادة واستفادة وحتى لا تمسكي بكتاب الله وسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على خير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and peace and blessings be upon His beloved messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, and just so that people are aware of what the plan is, I'm just going to be speaking for 20 minutes, and then we're going to be praying Salatul Asr, inshallah. Okay, so for session 4, we're going to be talking about the Sunnas of successful marriages and what successful marriage needs. So now we've talked about, getting married, and now we're into, now it's already done. It's a done deal. How do we take it forward in a positive way from here? Just so I get an idea of who's here, can I just get a show of hands? How many people are already married here? Okay, and how many people are not married? Oh, so the next event should be a matchmaking session, I guess, inshallah. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about our experience with having a positive and successful marriage. So to start with, the key to a successful marriage is upholding good character, and that's especially when tested, and it's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what I wanted to really emphasize here is that the good character that Sheikh Faraz was talking about earlier is really the foundational building block of how well your marriage will go, because it's how you conduct yourself. You can never really control another person, right? Or force them to act a certain way. What you really have the sphere of control over is yourself, and that's part of the wisdom that on the last day, that we are all going to be brought before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and accountable for ourselves, first and foremost. So when we talk about good character and how we are with another person, because we're with people every day, but we're talking about the closest relationships that you have, and that's with your family. The people who are with you day in, day out, they see you when you're in a good mood, when you're happy, when you're upset, and it's your ability to maintain that good character that the scholars always call us to and emphasize. When people aren't watching you, when it's just your family there, and how are you behaving? So this is a chart. This chart was done by Sheikh Faraz. It's from Ibn Rajab, and what he mentioned as how you manifest good character, and that's in 5 respects. One is fulfilling the rights of another person. Secondly, that you avoid harming them, that you're not doing anything that would hurt them, like especially intentionally. Being cheerful and positive, responding to the good with good, and responding to bad with good. And then now just to talk about, I'll just put that. Noble character, that what it takes to have noble character is that first and foremost is that one's priorities are in order. And so as Muslims, because we're talking about a group of Muslims, is that our priorities are in order, meaning that, we live and we breathe seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of our days. Like, just take the topic of marriage aside, what is our goal as Muslims? And so that is, I'm going to need some water. Yeah, just give me some water. That in every day when we wake up in the morning, or from morning to night, is that we should be seeking like the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and seeking. Sorry, I was a little bit unwell, so. So we're seeking His pleasure in everything that we do. So that whenever we make a decision, right from that moment when your alarm clock goes off in the morning, that you're seeking to do what is most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in line with the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he's the most beloved of examples that we have. So that will go from like how you conduct yourself from when you wake up, how you spend your day, and how you conduct yourself as a person. So this is the main criteria that you look at the whole universe, that you're looking at, really striving to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout your day, right? And that's whether you go to work. This applies to all of us in this room, subhanAllah. That with every, when there's choices, there's a dozen choices before us, how you can, are you going to pray Asr now, or are you going to do it later when you get some other things done that you wanted? Or what's most on your mind at that moment, and you're sort of going with the flow like that. So when we're talking about here is that one's primary intent, and this is going to come into noble character, because this is how you will decide on a moment-to-moment basis how you're conducting yourself with the people around you, and that's whether you're married or not married, or it's just how we spend our days, because this is what is, as we all know, it's accumulating for us on the last day. So the first aspect of that is patience, and there's a really good book, unfortunately it's not in stock right now, The Clarification of Noble Character. It's written by Habib Omar ibn Hafiz, and that talks about character. Like if you want to look at how to improve your character, this is a good book. It starts with patience, and it talks about patience being the foundational building block, in which that's what will help you to restrain yourself to have good character with the people around you, right? And this is an aspect that, it's almost from the fitra of women that we're able to be patient with our, with life, subhanAllah, that we're better able to restrain what you're feeling. So this is what will restrain you from not having bad character with the people around you, that you're able to hold yourself in check, and you're able to take a step back and think, when you're provoked, what is most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this respect. The second aspect is forbearance. That's self-control when angered. If you have a disagreement with your spouse, that moment to moment, what is the most beloved way for me to conduct myself at that moment? Magnanimity, that one I had to look up. It's avoiding stirring angers in others. There's some people that have that aspect, and this is one of the attributes of the Prophet ﷺ, that if someone is greatly angered, just the way he would conduct himself would bring like tranquility and calm to that person, and the person would no longer be provoked. Almost just the ability to disarm someone who's angry, or at the very least not provoke someone to be angry. And that's really important in relationships, that and there's a number of books written on that when you're interacting with another person, there are subtle cues that you're getting from that person in a moment-to-moment basis when you're talking to them. You might be discussing something and you're asking, what do you think about this idea? I'd like to go to this event later on. And you can see just from, the words of, let's use the example of the spouse, is that they're saying, okay, just go ahead and do it. But their body language, the way their facial expressions are, just how they're responding to you. Their words are saying one thing, but you're not listening to the other cues that person is giving, right? So, for example, you can tell that they really don't agree with you going to that event, for example. So that's something that you don't want to just ignore. So here I'm talking about communication skills. So what a lot of the marriage therapists are saying now is that a lot of the marriage books actually teach, they put such an emphasis on communication these days. They always say, what's the best aspect of marriage? What's the strongest point? And they'll always say, oh, it's communication between the spouses. How well can they speak to one another about a given problem? And so what they're saying is that the emphasis in some of the books now, they're actually saying the emphasis on that has been overrated almost, right? Because it's not all about communication. It's also, this book I was reading, it's something like the myth of I can't remember the title, not well. But if you put, I can put it on the marriage forum for people who join that course. But it was talking about how, a lot of people think it's all about communication. If I'm having problems with my spouse, it's because we can't communicate. When in reality, it's more about the character of the people, right? SubhanAllah. And then it started going over, it's really important to have certain character traits. And we don't really have a model of this because it was a non-Muslim. We don't really have a model, but these are the traits, and subhanAllah, one after another, it was listing the attributes of the Prophet ﷺ. And so we see from that, and they were saying this is the most key thing to the success in your marriage. If you're able to uphold these character traits, this will lead you to have like the best of marriages. But subhanAllah, just reflecting on that, I was thinking how they just don't have the complete picture that we actually do have a model of exemplary character for us as Muslims. The next aspect is truthfulness, that you trust your spouse, that what they say is true. Within lines of the just talking about when is that sometimes there's lying which is permissible, but you always have and I believe it's on the next slide, but the importance of husn adhan. Husn adhan is always holding your spouse in a good opinion. Like there's so many times where you might have waswasa or like just the shaitan is making you think, well, what if they did this? What if, or just this past line of questioning, oh, what if he's hiding something? What if he really was doing this and that, and things like that. So you just have to sort of ignore the waswasa and always hold the person in a good opinion. And that's something that we have to do for all Muslims, right? It's not about judging anyone, how someone looks, or how they and then just inwardly criticizing them, because this is one of the tricks of the shaitan in how to break relationships. And that's especially the case with your spouse, because you will see all sides of them that that no one else sees, and it's very easy to go down that path of oh, you know what, they're doing this too, and this, and you can just keep going and going. There's no limit to it, because what it's actually distracting you from is looking at yourself, right? And evaluating how are you actually doing as a Muslim, and what kind of character flaws do you have that you're not even like thinking of. You're just so focused on picking on that other person mentally that you're just it's as they say, like it's as if we're all asleep, and then one day we'll wake up and then we'll find out what reality is. That your entire life can go by and you haven't really addressed the problems within yourself. So that's something to keep in mind. The next aspect is mercy. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ, he was the most merciful to the people around them. And so that goes especially between the husband and wife, that it should be mutual, that both of them are seeking to make things easy for the other person. That you look for that, and I believe it's on the next slide too, that your concern is that you're always thinking of the other person and how to make life easier for that person, and trying to help them in the best way you can, and not, on the day of judgment, we always have to remember, like, this is the day where they say we will flee from, like, your spouse or your parents, your siblings, because of the account that we'll have to, bring forward. So we want to strive to not have that person accountable for how they've conducted themselves. Not to say anything about Sheikh Faraz, he's a great guy. So I'm just saying, just in general, that's something you'd always keep in mind, that you want to make things as easy as possible for that person, in the relationship, because you want them to be rewarded for how they're conducting themselves. So if you're conducting yourself in a challenging way, that you might provoke them into acting a way that they're going to be accountable for, so you want to avoid that. Holding the spouse in a good opinion. There we go. We talked about that we're always thinking the best of them and more concerned about our own flaws than we are about the flaws of our spouse. And then the next one, assisting one's household, preferring others versus seeking personal fulfillment. And that's what a lot of the authors in marriage these days are saying, that part of the dissatisfaction that people or humanity in general are having now is that, when they're getting married, that they're looking for, how is this person going to make me happy? Like, I want to get married, so then, it's somebody I can hang out with, I'll be happy, I'll be with them, it'll be fun kind of thing. So they're always looking for, or even that idea of the spark that we talked about before. Some people are thinking, a marriage relationship is supposed to start off with a spark, and it's supposed to be very exciting, and that's what they're looking at. They're looking at beauty, they're looking at wealth, they're thinking we'll have a good time. But when you're looking at it from that perspective, what you'll find is that it won't last very long. And that's what a lot of people are finding, that they're like, well, this person's not making me happy. And then they start looking at the grounds of divorce. I don't really like this person. Why am I with them? And it's all about why aren't they making me happy enough? Why can't they do this? Why can't they do that? And focusing on that. For me, one of the most striking talks that I've been to was at the Riz conference, where Habib Ali, he was talking about, the nature of marriage, and he was saying that the most successful marriage is the one where each spouse is striving to outdo the other in goodness to the other person. So it's not about what are you doing for me, why aren't you doing this, why don't you vacuum, anything like that. It's more of, striving to outdo that person in good. So I'm going to strive, I'm going to do my hardest, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that I want to do what is most pleasing to Him. And so, that's what if both spouses have that aim in mind, you can imagine the kind of tranquility that will descend on that household, that each one is striving to outdo the other person in good. And so if it's the case that, only one person has that intention, and, whether it be the wife or the husband, and the other spouse is, busied with other things, or, maybe they don't really seem to care, it wouldn't really bother them, because you know what? They're not doing it for that person. You're not trying to help that person so that they'll like you more, or, then they'll owe you and they'll have to help you. It's not about that. It's about serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of the day, right? So that's what you're seeking. It's not about seeking something for yourself. It's about seeking Allah, and what kinds of deeds can you get in that day that will count on your record on the last day. There's also humility, and that's about, not, thinking that you're better than the other person, that we should always be humble as Muslims, And your flaws, as I said before, should stand out to you in a greater way than that of your spouse. Sorry, and abstinence, that's not being worldly, not causing your spouse problems in, like, why can't I have this? Why can't I have that? Why can't we compete with the Joneses next door? Whereas the next version of the iPads come out, where's mine kind of thing. You don't give them a hard time about things like that. That it's from the Sunnah to do without it, and not to make excessive demands or cause unnecessary strife between the partners. So just to sort of evaluate that. And the last one was loyalty and trustworthiness, that one remains loyal to their spouse. And that also includes, the adab of, for example, lowering the gaze that at work or whatnot, that you wouldn't be looking at like coworkers or things like that. There's the aspect of, it's not permissible to begin with. But secondly, you have that loyalty to your spouse, that's not something that you ever do, right? And that they can trust you. And so these are just some foundational building blocks of having a good marriage. And so we saw earlier that Sheikh Faraz also mentioned that hadith, the best of you are those who are best to their spouses. And the Prophet ﷺ said, and he was the best to his spouses. And the importance of the best of character. So I think this sort of ties it in together with what Sheikh Faraz was talking about earlier, that marriage really is, the completion of half your religion. And you can see why, because it takes from you and it sort of tests you on so many fronts that nobody else sees, right? How you conduct yourself, when in private is, holding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the forefront, that you're striving to please Him, that you can see why it sort of ties everything together. This is really half of your religion, how you conduct yourself, at home with your spouse, and how, it's just, I don't want to be too oppressive, but there's some other, just quickly, the importance of some other aspects of a successful marriage, and that was communication, and we talked about that briefly, just resolving differences with other, like if you have a disagreement with your spouse, there's a certain way to talk about it, right? Like when they start talking about, insults being hurled at the other person, or you never listen to me, or raising of voices, this is not something that as a Muslim that we should ever do, that we're always, you have a disagreement, but you'll always be held in check by knowing how the Prophet ﷺ conducted himself, right? And he was not someone to blame people. We see the incredible example of Anas radiallahu anhu, who served the Prophet ﷺ for 10 years, and he wasn't blamed even once. Like, why didn't you do this, or why didn't you do that? That there is always a certain gentle way of correcting the people around him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and an etiquette that one should always hold in check. And they're talking about how marriages that end in divorce, often signs of the sickness of a marriage is that the two people are not able to conduct themselves with adab during a disagreement. And it's almost like a hill going down. Like one is saying something and provoking the other person, and they're saying even worse things, and it gets to be almost a race in trying to, you're feeling hurt by that person, and so you're striving to hurt them back, almost as revenge, and you're no longer working on the problem. So that's why it's really important to be able to talk about that with adab. And they also talk about the right time to discuss matters, that one should really enjoy the time they have with their spouse. They should be your best friend, really. But if you have something heavy to discuss, the best time isn't when, they come. You have to have a degree of wisdom, that it's, you reflect on it and ask at the best time, not when they're relaxed or not when you're all having a good time and then you say, by the way, what are we doing about the income taxes this year, or anything like that. That you're choosing the time, like, I would like to discuss this such and such a matter with you. So when can we set aside some time and let's talk about this thing. Another point of communication is being a really empathetic listener, because a lot of times when we're discussing things, sometimes you're so focused on thinking about what you're going to be that you're not really listening to the other person with true empathy. So you want to really reflect that you understand what they're saying, and books will talk about that. But we see that in the Prophet ﷺ, that even if a slave girl came and took his hand, he would go with her and listen to her and give the full attention, not be distracted by anything. And we see that with nowadays it's not from adab to sit with your spouse and have like a phone or an iPad in front of you and just be sort of saying you're not really giving your full attention. So if for a person to make the intention that the Prophet ﷺ, when he would turn towards a person, he would turn with his entire being. So making that intention and then listening to your spouse and striving to work it out, that there's a real sakina or tranquility that will descend on that household, and the difference will be resolved, inshallah. And then the final aspect was about sound decision making as a family. That once you're married, we're talking about how to resolve the marriage contract and whatnot. But once it's all done, it's important to realize who's the Amir of the family, and that's the husband. So he's the one who's going to be making the final decisions for any kind of major decisions that come to the family. And it's not something to be envious of, because on the last day he's going to be the one questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as to every single decision he made. So as women, it's important to just have your voice heard with etiquette, that you make him aware of your opinion, and then you leave the decision to him, because he's the one who's going to be questioned. And then whatever decision he makes, that one has contentment, with that decision, and takes it in stride, not acting sulking or I can't believe you didn't listen to me or things like that. You take it happily, as if, because that's the decision made for the family. So. And then the last aspect of having a successful marriage, what they talk a lot about in the books, is it's really important to work together towards a common goal as part of a long-standing relationship. That this is something that will really help the relationship, and that can include volunteering together for any kind of Islamic association, or maybe for the Mississauga Food Bank, or whatever you can do as a family. That really helps down the road once you have children, that the emphasis isn't always on me, myself, and I, or our little family unit, and how can we make things better for us, but having that concern for the community in whatever capacity that you can. Secondly is seeking knowledge. I'm sure there's not a single person in this room who's content with the amount of knowledge they have. And as a family, if you were to seek knowledge, that also adds a lot of blessings to the marriage, because that common concern for good and correcting ourselves and improving ourselves, that is something that can really help the relationship, right? And having that common concern. Or maybe sometimes you might slip at home and you might start talking about something you shouldn't have, and it's the other person who reminds you about, let's do something more useful with our time, for example. Raising children is another kind of project. It's almost like a project that you're working on together, and that's a 20-year project at least, if not more, to raise children with other, children that love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're not forced, into doing these things, and that's something you work on together with the right kind of. It goes back to what I started with when I started talking about having your priorities in order, and that's part of the wisdom when he was talking about why is there such an emphasis on choosing a spouse based on religion, and it all comes back to here that when you choose a spouse based on religion, you almost have certain things that you would expect to be in place, that this person is seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're more almost forgiving of your mistakes. They're better able to help you along this path that we all have until the day that we're questioned. So, and that includes raising children. We're going to be accountable for how we raise them, and we want to raise them in the best way. So you're working together on that, and working together on helping the elderly. And here I was meeting more of a lot of us. You'll have children, and then you'll have to start dealing with elderly family members, and that's together, like seeking their benefits, seeking their good, striving to help them. And it might not even be relatives, like just other members of the community. There's a lot of loneliness out there, and we should really work together to eradicate that and help them, whether they be Muslims or even not Muslims. If you can manage that and manage your household, then these are all things to work towards. So that's all of the things that I wanted to mention today. So the real emphasis, what I want you to take away from my part of the presentation was just really think, when you're in a relationship, how to conduct yourself in the best way, in the way that is most beloved to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That if you were to be, inshallah, I'll be considered amongst his ummah, but if he was present with you when you are having these interactions with your family, how would you conduct yourself, right, in the best way? So really, bring that to the forefront of your mind the next time you're, with your parents or with your spouse or with your children, that you really bring to mind how should I be conducting myself without letting yourself get carried away with being angry or having, your priorities not in order, for example, like not having adab towards parents and things like that. Or even with your spouse, that maybe I can convey the same thing, my same concern, in a better way. So just keeping that in mind, inshallah.
So we've reached Asr time, so we're going to pause for Asr, and if you need to leave, ahlan wa sahlan, we have some snacks after that, and we'll have some time for questions. Every time I've got enough people who wanted to ask questions, so we'll take questions till Maghrib. You're going to take attendance now. Who left? You can leave whenever you want, inshallah. But it gives opportunity to ask further questions. Also, just to note, there's quite a lot of material to cover, so there's some simplification of things. The most important decision you make in life is not what's your career or what house you'll buy or whether you buy or rent. One of the most significant life decisions is whom you marry, and how you go about getting married. So there's a lot more to it, right? And we try to make some main points. There's a lot more nuance to it than this. Take your marriage seriously. When you're getting married, work on the marriage before you get married. Just to close, one of the points to keep in mind, very often we think about, what am I looking for in a spouse? But one of the aspects that Muhammad highlighted is that just as important as whom you choose to marry is how will you be entering the marriage. That if you're looking for someone of religion and good character, strive to be a person of religion and good character before you enter into the marriage. Be ready, be a worthy spouse yourself. And so take your own religion seriously, and particularly work on your own character. You're not born with good character. Kids aren't born as angels and then things happen to them. Right? If you've dealt with kids, kids aren't born angelic. As soon as they can express themselves a little and move, they start crying and crawling and scratching and all other kinds of things. And some of us never leave that. And so work on yourself. And there's a lot of good resources and material to work on that. And people spend literally months. I have friends, religious friends, spend months deciding on the floral arrangement and decoration. Weird things. I've never noticed a floral decoration at any wedding I've been to. Couldn't care less. Right? What cake they'll get. Right? Who remembers the cake at their best friend's wedding? Right? But what did you prepare for being married yourself? Nothing. Right? People spend more time discussing what kind of bow tie you'll wear or this or that. So give it some time. It's a worthy investment. There's good literature and there's a lot of wisdom out there. Choose carefully, because there are also people who have some really weird ideas on marriage, both in the broader society and also some Muslims. They have freakish ideas of what a marriage is. So there's literature that we could recommend. Just very briefly, if I were to recommend 3 books on marriage, the first author I'd recommend, very, very practical, is not a Muslim author. Is John Gottman, who's one of the world's widely regarded as one of the leading experts on marriage alive, and he's both a clinical psychiatrist and marriage counselor for many years, but also someone who himself has sort of family-centric values and his approach to marriage and advice has a lot of traditional wisdom in it too, backed by his research and experience. I mean, he has a number of very good books. There's one, it's got a gimmicky kind of title, but it's really one of the best books on marriage, called 7 Principles of How to Make Marriages Work or something. 7 Principles Marriage, John Gottman, you'll find it. It's all over the place. And he has a number of other good books on marriage as well. If you're having trouble in your marriage, he has him and as a co-author has a beautiful work called The Relationship Cure. It's very, very good. And in terms of books by Muslim authors, there's an excellent work by Sheikh Hidayah Hartford with Sheikh Ashraf Munib called Islamic Marriage, Starting Off on the Right Foot or something. Yeah, they changed the title.
Upholding an
It's like Islamic Marriage, Hartford.
Upholding. There's a few copies at the
there's
front.
copies through those books sells it. It's a very, very good book, and there's many other books, but those are some recommended. I'd recommended 2. I forgot the third. The third really is learn about good character. That's one of the central themes, right? Like learn about good character. And what is good character? Right? Good character is the Prophet ﷺ. And there's a number of excellent works on prophetic character. There's a beautiful work by Habib Omar bin Habib called
The Clarification of Noble Character.
And that's available through those books and others. And there's other work, but that's something to learn about, because that is the example of beautiful marriage. And the more you learn about the Prophet ﷺ in general, about his character, but particularly in the context of marriage, you'll see a lot of benefit. So work on on that bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه